Alright, quick lesson on simplifying radicals, which is turning square roots of larger numbers into smaller numbers, plus a whole number that they may be multiplied by. Now the radical portion of this is called a mixed radical because it includes a whole number coefficient, the actual radical, which is the square root sign, and then the number under the square root sign, which many people call a radicand. It's kind of specialized language, but you might need to know it. Now some radicals are very easily simplified because you know what two numbers multiply to make 16. It's 4 and 4. Like, you know what number times itself gives 16. The answer is 4, so that's an easy square root. Some people might argue that the square root of 16 is positive or negative 4, but if we explicitly wanted both of those, we're supposed to write the plus minus in front of the radical. In any case, the square root of 16 is 4, and you already knew that. But what if you're given a number that you can't square root directly? Well, 16, which does have a perfect square root, goes into 32. So you can break this up into the square root of 16 times the square root of 2. Multiplying two radicals will give you the same, multiplying two square roots by each other will give you the square root of the product. You're allowed to break this number up into two numbers that multiply to make it. Now, the square root of 16 is 4, and so you're allowed to rewrite root 16 as just 4. You're still stuck with the root 2, but root 32 has been simplified to give you this coefficient and a smaller radical. Now, what numbers go into 300? Well, oh, there's a cat in my way. Go away. Love you. The square root of 300 is not a perfect number, but the square root of 100 is. Now let's say you didn't even come up with the 100 right off the bat. Maybe you note that the square root of 25... Oh, come on. I'll cut that. The square root of 300 is not a perfect number, but the square root of 100 is. So you can break the square root of 300 into the square root of 100 times the square root of 3, since 3 times 100 is 300. Now the square root of 100 is a nice round 10, and so you can rewrite this as 10 times the square root of 3. Great mixed radical. Done. Now you may not have come up with that right off the bat. Maybe you didn't notice that it was divisible by 100. You're also allowed to pick smaller square roots as long as you pick all of those smaller square roots. Maybe you note that 300 is divisible by 4. You're allowed to break root 300 into the square root of 4 times the square root of whatever 300 divided by 4 is. I got it to be 75. So it simplifies to 2 root 75. The problem is that's not fully simplified because 75 is itself simplifiable by 25. That's 2 root 25 times an extra root 3. See how the 75 is 25 times 3? Yes. Now that root 25 gets rewritten as a whole 5, and you have your mixed radical of 3. And because 2 and 5 are nice whole numbers, you can probably simplify that to 10. 2 times 5 is 10 times the root 3. Oh look, it's the same answer with extra steps. So you don't have to find the largest perfect square that divides into it on the first go. You can break it up piece by piece by piece. Now I want to show you a shortcut to find all the numbers that are all the perfect squares that are divisible by this, but you need a scientific calculator and it needs to have a specific button on it. One of my scientific calculators has a button that calls itself pFact. This one calls itself just regular fact. Where am I here? Oh, there it is. You can see it says fact. Focusing while I'm holding the calculator is an ill-advised idea, but you get the idea. It says fact there. So what I can do is type in my number 300. I pressed equals to make sure that I'm dealing with the number 300. And then if I press Shift Fact, it'll break it down into what's called its prime factorization. 300 is 2 times 2 times 3 times 5 times 5. All the numbers that are squared here are going to be perfect square numbers that I can pull out, like this root 4 is the 2 squared, and this root 25 that I pulled out is the 5 squared. You might notice that 2 times 5 are both squares, and that's why I was able to pull out the square root of 100, which itself was 10. Anyways, if your calculator has a p-fact button, then you have totally have a shortcut. Some calculators will also simplify radicals for you if you just type square root of 300. Some of them will just say 10 root 3. You're probably not watching this video if your calculator does it for you, but some calculators do. Hey, best of luck to you.